I looked here thinking you gave me more claims.
No,
So ahead.
I
Thank you
didn't.
for returning. I usually have no pen, so I guess a dud pen is better than no pen. Or all the same.
There you go. Well, Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah.
Is this our first meeting of the new year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I feel like we've already had one for.
it's been a minute.
So,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the first council meeting of the year. Nate, any additions to the agenda?
no changes. Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. And motion carries. On to 2 public hearings. I'd like to open public hearing. It is 7 p.m. Nate, I'd like to explain what we have going on.
Hopefully, there we go. Mayor and Council of the City of Lennox have received an application to transfer a liquor license from Lawrence Enterprises, the only one, to Fencing Around Inc. State law requires a public hearing for the application of any new liquor license. This application is to transfer all licenses for the only one bar and grill from Joe Lawrence to Fencing Around, owned by Jack Rentschler. The mayor is advised to allow time for proponents and opponents to speak on this application, followed by a vote on issuance of said license. Our recommendation is a motion to approve.
Good, thank you. Anybody want to wish to, or come forward and speak on this matter, please come up. Okay, seeing that there's none, we'll move on to council discussion. Any discussion from council?
This property's been up for sale for quite a while now. I feel like moving forward on this would be beneficial to Lennox.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I'll look for a motion to approve the license transfer.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
It's exciting to get a new owner of that place. Exciting for the sellers and exciting for those coming in.
Yes.
All right, all in favor for the approval to transfer the liquor license, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Now I'll close the public hearing at 7:02 p.m. On to visitors to be heard. Please come forward if you'd like to share this evening, state your name and address, and this is items not pertaining to the agenda. All right, seeing that there's none, we'll move on to consent agenda. Nate, anything you'd like to draw attention to with that tonight?
Mayor and Council, several items on the consent agenda tonight that deserve some attention. First, we're renewing our lease with the American Legion. We're increasing the lease rate and also making the lease auto-renewable instead of having to renew it every year. There's a resolution for the SMGA Membership Advisory Board, appointing board membership to that, with me serving as the primary and Mayor serving as secondary or alternate. Cleveland Avenue agreement that we discussed a few weeks back, that's been okayed by County Highway Department. Assuming that we approve it here tonight, we'll send it on to the County Commission for action. The first of what I assume are going to be 3 or 4 special event permits for Park Drive after 5. So that is the first special event permit for that. We have an amended schedule of salaries and wages. We are 3 cents off on one wage, so we fixed that in this one. Next resolution is accepting the infrastructure of Security Bank, so Security Drive, the water, sewer, and everything else included there. Accepting a grant for the Danner Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources Urban Forestry Grant. Accepting a resignation and 3 appointments. If you haven't seen the memo, what was updated about an hour ago, 3 appointments to the Park Board. That is Matt Hart, Shane McCarty, and Robert Behringer. And last but not least, some amended job descriptions for our seasonal employees. Assuming those are approved tonight, we'll begin advertising for those starting this week.
All right, well, on the consent agenda this evening, thank you. We'll have discussion from council.
I'm excited that we're building back our park board. Sounds like we've got 3 very competent individuals joining that group. That's exciting. Also, what was our original ask in the DANR grant, the forestry grant?
5,000? 5,000.
And we were gonna match 5,000, but they came back at half of that?
25, yeah.
Right.
So ours will be 25. So.
Yeah. Just wanted to get that clarified, thank you. Reading through the pool setup, those are really positive changes in the way this is organized and how it's written, and really the usability of it. It's a job well done.
Other discussion? Okay. Seeing that there's none, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Yep, motion in the second. We'll do roll call this evening. Vendrell,
Aye.
Swear,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
Welch,
Aye.
Doherty,
Aye.
Beasy.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We'll move on to old business this evening, ordinance 664 for the supplemental appropriations.
Mayor and Council, this is the second reading for ordinance 664. Passed the first reading at the December 22, 2025 City Council meeting. There have been no changes to the ordinance since that time. We recommend a motion to approve second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On to new business. We have parks and recreation policies. Will Christie come up for that? Our Parks and Rec Director.
I can just give a quick highlight of the main items that I had changed within our park and rec policy, and then certainly can open it up for questions. But one of the major changes that we made was there was a lot of recreational program information within the park and rec policy that really felt more like a program manual for operations to be used for myself in carrying out the programs and knowing timelines and which leagues we're part of and that sort of a thing. So a lot of that was removed, and I created a new program operation manual for myself. And the park board did review that and kind of gave their blessing on that, and that won't be needed to be motioned for changes on that particular item, but any significant changes, and that I'll be going to the park board with. So then what remains within the Parks and Rec new policy that is being recommended, really a lot of it has to do with reordering structure-wise, trying to have ease of use for that so that we can reference back as needed. I added in state authority and city ordinances as it relates to the park board so that it's right there at our fingertips to see what's involved with the park board itself. I added in a statement that the park board's role in recreation, because per the ordinance, it's a park board, and so we've always had it be where the park board is also giving a lot of insight, input, decisions on the recreation side. So that was added. We also had just a couple things like our campground, the rules were not inserted in there. Nothing changed as to the operation of that, but they're just included in there. Inclement weather policy, I did some research as to how that should be worded and added some more detail into that in terms of thunder and lightning protocols. And then the most significant portion of changes had to do with the swimming pool section. So some of the swimming pool items I took out and will be included within the swimming pool employee handbook, which will be reviewed at a later time here. I'm getting close to done on that. But some of the significant changes really had to do not so much with how things are being carried out at the pool. A lot of it, the policies and pool guidelines just weren't really necessarily written down anywhere for the general public for what their expectations are, the code of conduct enforcement. I tried to include information about supervision expectations for parents and guardians that are there in terms of non-swimmers, developing swimmers, and independent swimmers and so forth. And just general behavior, water safety, pool deck and diving board rules as well. So that's a highlight.
Great, thanks for your work on this. Any council questions for Christy?
Looks good.
All right, we got our chance. No, but looks good. Thanks, Christy, for your work on this. We'll look for, let's see here. I guess we don't have any necessary action with this policy.
Yeah, we would recommend a policy or
To
a
approve.
motion to approve the policies.
Okay. I'll look for a motion to approve this Parks and Rec policy then.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. On to 6.2 base flood elevation study. Just have Mitch come up for that.
All right, good evening. We had a scope of basic services for a work order involving the basic elevation study. If everybody's got that work order, if you could flip to the last page there, I'll give you kind of an overview of what we're, the project limits and whatnot. This study is, I guess for those that aren't familiar, you're part of the National Insurance Program. Most cities are, and with that, you're in charge of permitting projects that are adjacent to the floodplain. And in Lennox, there's really two floodplains that the city is adjacent to, one being the Long Creek tributary and the Lennox tributary to Long Creek on the east side. FEMA is right now, they're the governing agency that's responsible to establish the floodplain, and that's what Nate uses as the floodplain administrator to regulate off of when those projects that are adjacent to these areas come in the city hall. FEMA is updating those maps currently. We have preliminary maps for them they've been working on for probably the last 10 years, and they haven't become effective yet, but they're scheduled to become effective in the next couple of years, I'd say. Even as those are developed, those studies don't have any elevation data, so even in 2 years when they do become effective, there's no corresponding elevation data along with those floodplains. It's just a boundary, if you will, and it doesn't correlate to any elevation. To get to correlate to an elevation, we have to do this particular study. Again, that helps Nate and your staff just with being able to know when someone comes with a project, how high they have to build their structure. Right now, it's unknown. That burden is on the developer to establish that. A lot of times I see a municipality do these studies though, so that not every developer has to go through that exercise, and it's just known as they come in to do their project. Typically once, again, we're gonna study it from a northern limit that it goes outside of city limits to a southern limit that's beyond city limits there as well. For us to study that whole portion usually is roughly the same process as if we were doing just a small chunk of it. So you're better off just doing it all in one go so that you don't have 10 different times that you're addressing this through different developers and whatnot. So there's a kind of a cost savings there in the long run for the community, I'd say. But with that, our scope of work will be to establish the data that FEMA needs to be able to incorporate that into their maps. The work that we do doesn't take all that long, but the review for FEMA is at least a year-long process. Not that we can pass some of the information on to the developer that's developing at this time, once we have it, but for FEMA to officially acknowledge it, it's gonna take about a year for them to do that. Locally, we can permit off of a study. The maps don't necessarily have to be changed to be able to permit, so it'll aid your staff as soon as we have data available. Any questions?
So, I guess what's common practice is looking at it naively, why would the developer be responsible for this cost versus the city doing it, or what benefit does it give us? I know you mentioned just, now we're comfortable with the elevation, so when we get a plan, we know if it's legitimate or not, but just kind of curious on what's kind of rule of thumb. Is this common for communities to do? Is this 50-50? Is it, what's normal?
I'd say it's fairly common for developing communities. Communities that maybe aren't developing all that much, maybe don't have a need to go through the exercise. But I can tell you we've done it for Brandon, we've done it for Hartford, those are two communities. And it was kind of the same item where they had developments come in that were adjacent to their tributaries. And there's probably some costs you could look at passing on to the developers if you wanted to create a fee or something like that as a full building permits or whatever that might look like.
Yeah, that wouldn't be we don't know how frequently that's going to come about, but, there's 3 properties at this point. 5 years ago, we didn't have any properties in city limits and in the floodplain, now we do. And we'll have more with the new map. So that there may be a benefit to, maybe increase if there is an application that comes in from a floodplain that the fee is somewhat higher. You're not gonna recoup this whole cost, obviously, but, Harrisburg, they've been through it. I don't think Canton has. Brandon, Hartford, Dallas, maybe. Well, they would have had to for their flood mitigation project.
It's kind of varies, like, there's certain tributaries that FEMA through this mapping process will establish the elevations. And it's usually, I can't make heads or tails of how it seems to be if it's more rural in nature, then they don't always establish those elevations. But then you go to, I can point to a couple tributaries in Harrisburg where they are establishing them. So sometimes there's not a need to do it because FEMA will go through that, but in the smaller towns, it seems like they don't always establish that elevation data. Maybe they look at it as they're just not growing as fast as some of the other areas that they're more concerned about.
When was the last study done?
We've never done one.
Oh, we've never done it.
Again, it's not something that we've, until the last few years, Countryside was the first time we've had a property that crossed the floodplain in town. And, our discussions with Nielsen at the time were kind of like, well, until there's a reason to develop there, you're just not gonna touch it. Now we've got multiple properties, and it will be more, and so it makes sense to start doing this work now. The bottom line is if I get an application in tomorrow for a building permit on a property that's adjacent to a floodplain, I don't have a base elevation. So I can't say yes or no. We just don't have the information.
Would this have to be revised in X amount of years? Is there?
No, I haven't ever had to. Once the FEMA acknowledges it, they'll continue to acknowledge it. Even when they did these map updates, we maybe had to resubmit old studies to them when they update, just to go through the process again with them. But we've never had to go back and redo them.
I mean, obviously, we're looking at developing to the west, that's a big area this would benefit from. Is the industrial zone south of town something that we would need that information for?
Going east would be, so, looking at that map, you'll see where Wilson is in that 160-acre parcel that's currently annexed. And then, the lumberyard property, that crosses floodplain in the northeast corner. And all of our industrial growth has been south and east in the comprehensive plan. Then a ton of commercial along Highway 40, or 17 and 44 as well.
Then I'd say the northeast
Right.
quadrant up by Jerry's is probably gonna be, I see development heading that way. That's probably another area that would.
We'll see some residential up there.
Other discussion or questions for Mitch?
If we didn't do this, it would be on the developer, and we require their engineer to do these elevations and attest to the fact that that's all legit, correct?
That's right. Yep. And we would review it, and they'd have that burden. Right now, it's their burden to bear.
So when they have to do that, how long does it take them to be able to do that and get that information?
It'll probably take them 3 or 4 months. And then, but remember, they'll only do it for their property. And so you could end up with one for just a small segment on Long Creek, a small segment up on the Popinville land, a small segment on the countryside land, with 3 different engineers potentially doing it. We're reviewing those as they come through, so it adds time for us just in the review process. And that won't even get you everything done here. Again, and for the developers and for the people looking to develop here, it's probably the same fee that they have to put into their study. And then that other guy spent that same fee and other, so.
I was gonna say, it kind of creates a less barrier of entry for new people to come in.
Right.
Make it a little bit more attractive for.
Yeah, not only the time, but, it just makes it easier for them to do business with Lennox.
And wasted effort, there's a lot of wasted effort if you've got everybody responsible for their own piece. I mean, if the cost of something like this is the same whether you're doing 1 mile section or, in this case, several mile section, do the full. And save that wasted effort, wasted cost for somebody down the road, including us.
know there's at least 2 active projects that are investigating. Is there any opportunity to cost share with any of those folks?
Possibly.
You know, you guys will even benefit from that, I think about it, like, if we're talking about that trail along Hawk Creek, you know, some of that's in the floodplain, so some of the projects that you're looking to do would benefit from this. I think, Bill, I think you mentioned you like that area in that south of Jerry's.
Yeah.
So it's really.
Email.
Be an elevated trail.
You'll benefit.
Trestle, a trestle trail.
Right.
Does it benefit any of the citizens that are currently established?
If they were wanting to build on or add a building to their property. that would.
It will give them some more information. Say right now, if they have a structure that's adjacent to it, and they might be paying flood insurance and they're just barely in. If we can show that their structure now is higher than that elevation, then they can apply to get out of flood insurance. I don't know if you would have that situation, you might, we've seen that before with some communities where they have some properties that can support them not having to pay flood insurance anymore.
There are 2 that I can think of they're not in town, they're actually out in the county, but there are 2 that I can think of that would probably come out.
I guess the only other comment I kind of jumped out of me is it's not budgeted this year. Is this something that has to be done this year? Is it something that we'd be better served to budget for next year? 42,000 or whatever, I don't know if that's troublesome for us in this year's budget or not, but.
It's not, I mean, it's not budgeted, but it is something we have available. In terms of the drainage fund, it's got one real purpose at this point, it's just debt service. We pull in more than enough for that every year, based on the ordinance that was created back in 90s, late 90s. So, took a hard look at what's available in that fund balance. I'm confident we'd be fine.
Yeah, Jim, why don't you come up? Sure. Thanks, Mitch. We can ask Mitch more questions if we need.
Jim Lennox. I guess I'm a little bit confused. Has the study been completed, or are you just authorizing for the study tonight? And I guess, is there any data, that you've acquired already that can be made public, or?
No, so the only thing we're asking, no data's been collected. The only data that's available would be available through the FEMA flood maps that they've issued. Nothing else would be, we don't have anything.
So you don't have any data at this particular time?
No.
And so this is to do the whole metropolitan area of Lennox then?
It would be this map here. Try and do a little bit. So here's Fort. That whole side, down to half mile south of Lumberyard. Up here past, that's rocks. That's golf course here.
Well, what is your current policy now in regard to it, or don't you have one?
We have a flood ordinance because we're part of the National Flood Insurance Program. What this gives us is base flood elevation.
Now, will that be different than what the FEMA?
Potentially, most likely.
It will be different
Yeah, that's the expectation.
in what way?
Yeah, Mitch, if you want.
It won't be different, it'll add more data to FEMA's maps, because right now, the boundaries you see don't have elevation assigned to it. So that boundary will stay the same, because we'll be using their model and updating FEMA's model that they are working off of. So the boundaries won't change, it'll establish elevations so that, if you were to fill in that edge of the floodplain, you would know how much you could fill.
How much will this cost?
42,000.
How much?
42,000.
42,000. I guess wouldn't you just be better off to go with the FEMA data, save the 42,000?
Well, like you said, it doesn't give us all the information we would need to approve a permit for a plan that somebody wants to build. Like, on the west side of town right now, there's some proposals out there. Their engineers might give Mitch, hey, we think we need to raise it X amount of feet. This gives us the data to say, yes, that's appropriate, or that's not appropriate. It might say Mitch in Stockwell time. It also gives the developers that information to help them make their plan, to make sure that it's not gonna flood.
I guess that does concern me though, when you start raising elevations in areas that are close to my property, so.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what changes can be made?
So even currently, the, developer, in instance, the neighbor, they can fill, but they have to go through the exercise of this study to know how much they can fill. So anybody can do that on their property. The question is how much you can do, how high do you need to be, right? And there's federal regulations that dictate that. The city has their own floodplain ordinances that dictate that. Even today, without the study, they can go through that exercise.
But I guess to give him some peace of mind, like, this would help them develop, so they're not going to go too high, so that
Yeah.
it floods the neighboring property.
Yeah,
This-
that's my concern.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll be reviewing those plans to make sure it meets your guys' ordinances, and we're always looking at the adjacent properties too, to make sure that we're not causing an upstream problem or a downstream problem. So that's what we'll be involved with their plan when we receive that. One of the requirements of the city is that any structure that you have in the community has to be built 2 feet higher,
1 foot above base flood.
1 foot above base flood. And there again, that's where we don't know where base flood elevation is, but you have yet an ordinance that says everybody has to be 1 foot higher. Most of the time you see a developer, they don't want to bring in excess dirt that they don't have to. They'll build it basically as high as they have to. FEMA only requires you to be at their elevation or higher. Your ordinance is a foot higher just to give you some more cushion there, I guess I'd call it.
Would this data help us protect those neighbors, where now we have the elevation of the neighboring land that the developer may not do that part of the study? Does that give us better information to help make those
Yeah.
decisions?
I think from my perspective, when I'm reviewing the plans for you guys, it gives me more confidence. The more data I have, the more confidence I can have in that developer's project, that it's not gonna create a problem.
I suppose because you've got the full stretch instead of just that section.
Right. Yep.
It takes in a much larger picture than just that one property.
I
So
guess-
you have a rough idea.
I
By
guess-
looking at it, okay, could this make it worse? But if you don't study the full area, then you don't know. You can't take into account all the others.
I guess my concern is that some of the preliminary plans go through my daughter's property and my property, and I would just, I was kind of surprised that the preliminary plan included more than the 26 acres. And I'm concerned about that, and how much fill is going to be done in, and I guess I was disappointed that I wasn't contacted prior, that this was something that was part of the future plan.
I want to be cautious, I don't want to get us into discussion on preliminary plan tonight because it's not on your agenda, but we'll get a future meeting. But we can certainly sit down and go over that. I'm sure Mitch will be available to.
if you do have a study done, it will be made public, right?
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council?
Mitch, can you, it's probably in here and I may have missed it, if we agree to this, about how long do you think it'll be before we have the results of this study?
We probably need 4 months or so to get our draft study together. But then after that, we have to go through the FEMA process. And the reason why the FEMA's process gets so long is they have a 6-month review period, and they usually take all of the 6 months. I'm sorry, it's 90 days. It's a 90-day review period. They take all the 3 months. Usually there's some comments. If to resubmit, they get another 3 months. And by the
That
time
has never been a fast process.
I've never been
Not
through
in the
a fast
entire
process.
history of Flint.
So we may not see anything for a year.
You will see our draft study that the city can utilize.
And we can use that
Okay.
draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you won't see the maps, because our goal is to change the maps with FEMA. And so this is a map revision with them. That's the process that just takes a while to get through.
So if it takes a year and we've got some additions that are currently looking to start projects sooner than later, is it beneficial then at this point because they may move forward without us?
So we can, once the draft work is done by Stockwell, we can and submit it to FEMA, we can do permits based off of that data. Even though it's not been formally accepted into a letter of map revision issued by FEMA, we can still accept, or we can still work off of the data that Stockwell produces.
You can actually approve a permit just with the study. So there's 2 things that are happening. We're gonna do the study, the report that we put out. It could end there, but we're gonna take it to FEMA so that it is recognized and built into their maps, so that it's just set in stone for as long as they issue maps. But they will be able to permit off the study that we develop.
So then each individual developer for each individual project, will they still need to go through that cost for their engineer to verify that study? Or do they use that information and it makes developing less costly?
They do, their engineer does have to look at it and read through it, make sure they agree with it, because ultimately they are the ones that are certifying their design and their plans. So we'll make that available to them. Yeah, if there was anything that they didn't agree with, then they would account for that in their design.
I'm assuming this is just something that would be perhaps added as a layer in our GIS system or.
Potentially, yeah.
It should be once FEMA issues their letter of map revision, will be reflected in their maps and then reflected in the county's maps, which will then make it reflected in our maps.
Perfect.
It's all kind of built off the same data.
You spoke about transitioning some of those fees to the builders. Would they, or I should say, is there anyone around us that is currently doing that?
Not that I know of. I mean, if you did it, you'd probably do it in a cost recovery fashion. And I've seen towns do cost recoveries, but usually it's for like a sewer line that they put in, usually bigger projects than this. So like a water main that's put in, you might file a cost recovery so that if someone connects to it, that person connecting has to pay their fair share. But I'm certain that you have the ability to treat if you want to go through the exercise of that. Sometimes the cost recoveries can get to be a bit, some work to administer.
They can be complicated, but worthwhile.
Yeah, so it's definitely something you can look into.
My concern is if we set up a fee recoveries plan, at what point do we cut it off, or, how do we create those boundaries that would be more appropriate?
You could base it off of, any property that's impacted by the floodplain as revised. you know, if they were to want to develop within the city limits, that they would pay a higher development fee, for example. That's probably what we would do. The problem is not very many of these are annexed at this point, so.
Any other questions for Mitch?
I guess I just have one more question.
Sure.
You mentioned that Stockwell's reviewing all of these preliminary plans anyways, and even though you're doing that somewhat, well, you're doing it for the city, right? So you're gonna be charging us hours to review that regardless, correct?
Yeah, but what point I was trying to make is, I would also review their base flood elevation
Right.
studies that we.
Yep, and that's what I mean, like
Yeah.
in today's environment,
Yes.
you're having to spend more time because you
Yeah.
don't have the full picture. So
Correct.
when we're looking at cost recovery, really over time, this study could pay for itself.
Yeah, it saves us, that's for sure, yep.
Motion to approve work order 25140.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mitch. We're on to 6.3, Parks Master Plan.
David's turn.
Is that me?
That's you.
We're not as familiar with you, David, so share a little bit about yourself.
No, that's fine. David Locke, landscape architect with Stockwell. Before you guys is Parks and Rec master plan services to look at all of the parks citywide. So we would go through a public input process to hear from everyone, kind of like what you like, don't like, what improvements you think need to be made, really kind of get a baseline for what you guys currently have. We would then go through we would conduct a statistically valid survey, so there would be a public survey that would get sent out. We would send it out to essentially the Lennox School District area and ask more pointed questions in terms of, activities people would like to see, what do they think are important, parks that they like to visit, and use that data then from the survey along with some of our initial findings of meeting with stakeholders and public to then work towards a comprehensive master plan with the recommendations of what we and the city or the community has said they'd like to see improved upon. We would visit each of your parks and also evaluate them from an element standpoint. Do we have consistency within parks elements in terms of the materials that are used or what signage looks like? We would review basic ADA accessibility. A lot of that tends to come down to the type of play surfacing. So like sand is not considered an acceptable fall surface, and it's not acceptable, or it's not accessible. P-rock, for example, is still an accepted fall surface, but it is not accessible. So just kind of looking at some of those elements, or also if you have, picnic shelters or elements that people would need to utilize that is not connected to sidewalk throughout the park or connected to a public street. So those are kind of some of the basic elements that we look at when we visit each of your parks. And then we also look at the distribution of parks. Do we have them all concentrated in one area? Do we have good distribution throughout the community? And then as the community grows, are there certain areas that make sense to add a park in the future as these preliminary plans or subdivision plans come forward and be reviewed by you guys? So this would take all that information, put it into a formalized document where we look at, short-term, mid-term, and kind of long-term, path of recommendations, and is utilized by park board, by city staff to start to prioritize. Okay, we need to, pickleball courts. That'll be a comment, I guarantee it.
It's
Okay.
because we need pickleball.
Right, exactly. Every community does. And so, so say, we'll say, okay, we had, huge amount of input on pickleball courts, and that is a, high priority in the community. One thing with the statistically valid survey is that we need to get responses from kind of all demographics within the community. So you can't have the Pickleball Association go out and say, hey, this public survey's out, we're gonna get all our friends to go out there and say pickleball number one, pickleball number one, pickleball number one, so you can kind of swing the data one way versus the other. Same for like baseball fields or soccer fields. Typically the sports organizations are the ones that try to do that. So this kind of factors that out because we have to have a consistent demographic and consistent distribution of responses when it comes to the survey.
How do you ensure that you're getting that sampling that you just talked about?
They're able to look at where those questions are answered from, and also the demographics of the age range of people that are taking it. And there's a minimum, I think for this, based on the size of the community, I think it's 150 that they have to have in order to consider it statistically valid. After that, then, they do open it up to the general public to take the survey. And then they're able to kind of compare that data as well. Typically, there's not a big difference between the two, but yes, it is tracked and documented. If for whatever reason we're not getting the distribution that we need, then phone calls are made to specific households to get their feedback and input as well.
Thank you.
Process typically takes 6 to 9 months for maybe your next question.
I remember from the last time you were here. The last time you were here, we denied you, no?
Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the statistically valid survey. It just takes time to administer it. Because we go through a few iterations to get, park board or steering committee input on what the questions are. It then needs to be administered, which typically takes, 4 weeks or so, just to make sure we get back the responses we need. The data needs to be analyzed then and put into a full report before we can then use it as a basis for recommendations and such like that. So it takes a little bit of time in there to administer that. So that's just kind of why it's a little bit longer time.
So what does your recommendations end up looking like? What's the output of this look like? Is it, you should put this park in this location, you should build this field here, and this is what it's gonna cost? Or is it more like, hey, your community really wants this feature, here's some suggestions where they could go? Like what does it typically look like?
I would say it's a little bit of both.
Mhm.
So we will look at how many of each of the different amenities that you guys have, whether it's tennis courts, basketball courts, ball fields, and we will say, okay, generally based on a community of your size, you need to add, 2 more ball fields or something like that. And then we'll say, okay, based on, land that you have available, here's potentially the locations they could go, or based on your current availability of park or public land, you guys would need to purchase property in order to add these amenities to it. We then give a range of what those costs are, but typically it's not detailed scoping to the point of like we know exactly where it's going and how we're going to build it and all that kind of stuff. So then we'll give you a range so you know whether it's a $5,000 item or a $500,000 item. We just did it for the city of Del Rapids, so that report is available. I believe I've sent that in the past, but I can resend it again as a link for you guys to look at. We also just finished it, a similar or same type of report for the community of Livingston, Montana. We could provide you guys that report as well. Yeah,
park board, it might have been a year and a half ago or a while ago, they approved this, or made a recommendation to city council, and I think we liked the idea, we just didn't have this budgeted, and so we decided to kind of push it down the road a little bit, so. And then in Nate's memo too, we do have it budgeted for 2026, 1-12 right now. So I like it a lot, I like the idea, it really gives a roadmap, kind of where we can go, and kind of just even some guidance on about if we do wanna put some energy or resources into something, 2 Christmas trees that need to be lit up, maybe it'll make a recommendation on that. But no, I like where we're going with this, I am in favor of moving this forward. So any other questions for David?
I'm looking at phase 4 where it talks about the recommendations. When you have improvements to existing parks, would that also include, like, if you feel that a facility or a feature is underutilized, what we could better use that for? Would that be kind of part of this study?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And we would expect to get that kind of input in the survey as well.
Yep.
I would like to hear from our Parks and Rec Director, Christy Kranz, if she's got some thoughts she'd like to share.
I'm all about a plan. I think otherwise it can be easy to just kind of respond to what's coming in at any given point in time. And so having it like a comprehensive plan to go forth, that we can always have that kind of be our compass to go forward. I also think it's easier to partner with potential funding opportunities when you have that laid out like that, and people that might want to pitch in for the cause and that sort of thing. So I could really see this being very beneficial for our community, and I think the park board would also appreciate having that guidance along the way. So.
Couldn't agree more. And I think there's been lots of opportunities in the last year that have come up with properties and stuff, and it really is hard for us to make those decisions on purchasing things when we don't know what we really need. So I think that'll help us as these opportunities continue to come up in the future. Like you said, it's our compass, so we know what's truly needed, what we can do, so.
Thank you.
I also think it's important for new community members, people thinking of moving here, to know that there's a plan, there's a direction, that there's some sort of focus on these amenities that people with young families are looking for.
Wow, that's a good point.
Other discussion? Questions? Now I'll look for a motion to approve, let's see here, work order 25014. Parks master plan.
I'll motion to approve work order 25014.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, any final discussion? See that there's none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you, thanks David for sharing.
Absolutely.
All right, on to 6.4, joint powers, maintenance encroachment agreement with South Dakota Department of Transportation.
Mayor and Council, the City of Lennox and the South Dakota Department of Transportation have come to an agreement on lighting construction and maintenance along the new stretch of Highway 44, though I shouldn't say new, widened stretch along Highway 44. The DOT expects to reconstruct a 1 mile stretch of that highway this upcoming summer, widen it to 3 lanes. The project will also include new lighting, and DOT has involved us in discussions about that lighting. We requested it be upgraded to give us the ability to post banners and Christmas lights, similar to what we're already doing along Highway 44. This agreement includes that request, language on the maintenance of the lights, which is our responsibility, and the cost of lights at $12,150. I would expect this to be invoiced to the City of Lennox in 2027 or later. It's not unusual for us to get that a couple of years after a project. I think the trail was probably 4 years after the project, if I remember right, just because it takes time to close out those projects. But I recommend a motion to approve the joint powers agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, any discussion? All right, seeing that there's none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 6.5, 2026 legislative advocacy.
Mayor and Council, the 101st legislative session kicks off this week, tomorrow with the Governor's State of the State address. I won't go through the entire memo here, but you just want to focus on 3 items for advocacy this year. The first of those is property tax reform. I think it's obvious that something is going to happen here, and I think it's important that we play a role in that discussion. Not that we're opposed to reductions in property tax for our residents, but that it just can't come at the cost of vital services such as public safety. I think there is a way to make that happen, but it's gonna take some work. Second, tax increment financing. This is an important tool for communities of our size, and some of the changes that have been proposed already are particularly troublesome to small communities. They would benefit large communities, but not small rural communities. This is an essential tool to us, and we need to be able to protect that. So I think we can add some reasonable guardrails to TIF districts and the process, all while maintaining the importance of that tool. Last but not least, local control. I think over the years we've seen legislation introduced and in some cases approved that takes decision-making authority out of the hands of our local elected bodies, such as school boards, city councils, and counties, and puts it in the hands in Pierre that don't know anything about our counties, cities, and townships. So we're going to be making a big push to maintain that ability of towns to govern themselves as the Constitution gives us the right to do. Those are the areas that I'm hoping to focus on this year. There will be other items that come up that are of importance as well, and we'll handle those as they come, but our main attention is going to be in these areas. I do have our legislators' contact information included in the memo for you. I would expect to see issue alerts, action alerts, requests, contact our representatives and senator and peer occasionally throughout the session. So please keep an eye on your inboxes and social media channels to be aware of those. I do have, assuming there are no issues with these legislative priorities, I do have an article that's hopefully going to be going out tomorrow, if not Wednesday morning, and then will also be sent to our legislative delegation.
And this is all moving in real time. The session is in.
Starting tomorrow.
Right.
Well, technically, they'll gavel in the state of the state. I don't think committee hearings start until Wednesday.
Right, but if we're sitting about holding our tongues until the 31st when we have a Cracker Barrel here, we've missed it.
Correct. We're going to have to be vocal from the start on a lot of these things.
Right.
I hope to see all 3 of these folks tomorrow night and hopefully Thursday morning in here. So.
I just want to thank you ahead of time because I know you spend a lot of time sending us updates throughout legislative sessions. So thank you for going and being our ears when we're at our day jobs and just keeping us updated as to what's going on.
Yeah, and glad to do that. Happy to keep the community informed as well. They'll be a big part of this year as well. So.
Thanks, Nate, for being proactive with this. There's no action item on this. Any other discussion on the last agenda item? Okay. Now I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.